Good afternoon. My name is Mark Butler with Megaplan IT. For those of you that have joined, thank you. We will go ahead and get started in a few minutes, but we will allow a few minutes for other people to join so we can get started. So please stand by. Hi, this is Mark Butler with Megaplan IT. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to wait another minute or two for a few others to join, and we will get started. But thank you for joining the Megaplan IT webinar series. Hi again, this is Mark Butler with Megaplan IT. Thank you for joining today. We're going to wait one more minute and then we will go ahead and get started with our PA-DSS to SSF webinar. Again, thank you for joining, and we'll go ahead and get started in 1 minute. For those of you that are joining, thank you for joining the Megaplan IT webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about PA-DSS to SSF specifically. I'm going to wait just another minute. We're getting multiple others joining us as we speak. So I'm going to let everybody get settled and then we'll go ahead and get started. But thank you for joining. Welcome to the Megaplan IT webinar series. This is from our Compliance Services group. We're going to be talking today about the transition from PA-DSS to SSF in this webinar. So again, welcome. We appreciate you taking the time today. Hopefully this is a educational, informational, and helpful webinar on PA-DSS to SSF. And I will go ahead and get into the introduction. So our speaker today will be Anthony Petruso. Anthony is very experienced in compliance assessments of all types and varieties. He's been doing PCI for a very long time. He is PA-DSS certified, P2PE certified, as well as SSF certified. So Anthony Petruso is our VP of Compliance Services. We're very glad to have him on our team leading our compliance practice. And you will have the opportunity to hear from Anthony, not only from his experience today, but also his expertise in leading these types of very technical assessments that require not the body of knowledge, but also the expertise to pull them off well as you deal with complicated payment software, payment coding and the new frameworks that are trying to support newer software methodologies. So we're very happy to have Anthony here today talking with us about this transition. And I encourage you to reach out to him and definitely take advantage of his experience and expertise. And we're very happy to have him today. All right, let's go through just a short intro about Megaplan IT. So Megaplan IT was founded in 2009. We started out doing PCI compliance for companies that were really struggling with PCI compliance for the first time. And that really allowed us to get our foundation in place of making sure that we not only helped those clients reach compliance for the first time, but we helped them maintain that compliance over time. And many of the organizations we work with initially early on had attempted PCI compliance, but just never realized compliance from an effective control perspective. So we started out in PCI compliance, expanded to ISO, NIST, HIPAA, CCPA, CMMC, which is coming out. So, very, very strong compliance practice, very seasoned individuals from a leadership perspective and a consulting perspective. But we cover not only compliance, we cover penetration testing of all types and varieties, even continuous penetration testing models that we support. We also have a managed security practice, and we run all of these practices with a risk management mindset, and we understand what governance teams are looking for within organizations and entities so that we can fully support them. And we cover everything with a very disciplined project management expertise. So Megaplan IT is here not only to help reach compliance for companies and help them obtain compliance, but we really are solving the security challenges that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. And our leadership team is really focused on providing tangible value of improving the security programs, reducing actual risk within organizations, and becoming and maintaining compliance. And the long-standing trusted partner is really our focus area, and that's where we have the success year over year with the retention of our client base, because they know that we have their back, we're looking out for them, and we're going to help them in every way possible, not only reach compliance, but maintain that compliance in an effective manner. So from a certification perspective, we're obviously a QSA company. We're a payment application QSA, we're P2PE certified, we're a 3DS assessor, and an ASV as well from an approved scanning vendor perspective. And one thing that we have been doing is contributing to the Verizon Payment Security Report. And if you're not familiar with the PSR report from Verizon, I definitely recommend that you take a look at that. In addition to the data breach report that Verizon puts out every year, there's a more specific payment security report, and we're definitely a contributor to that and continue to be. So we're happy about that as well. So from an agenda perspective, we're going to do an introduction to SSF. We're going to talk about what's eligible to be assessed under SSF. We're going to talk about the important dates and timelines that are involved. We're going to talk about how SSF gives more options to software developers, which is actually a very positive change. We're going to go through the list of benefits and how those benefits make SSF more flexible, which is helpful, especially from a modern application development perspective. And then we're going to talk about specific next steps of how you can move forward in your planning and in your transition plan, and how to make sure that's a successful program as you transition to SSF over time. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Anthony, and Anthony can provide additional detail here on this agenda slide, and then he will get into his content. So Anthony, take it away.
Mark, thank you for the introduction. So getting into the agenda, getting into the discussion on Software Security Framework, we're going to take a step back and start by talking a little bit about the brief history of PA-DSS and how we've gotten to this point. If you could go to the next slide, please. So PA-DSS was launched back in 2008, and it was built on top of a visa program called the PABP, or Payment Application Best Practices. Over the past 12 years, PA-DSS has evolved through 6 iterations since its initial release, culminating in its current version of 3.2. And so through these 6 iterations, the primary focus and ultimate outcome has always been to create payment applications that are valid to be secure for deployment in a PCI environment and available for purchase in an off-the-shelf format. Although PA-DSS was the de facto standard for protecting payment applications, there were some shortcomings to the program. To properly plan for future payment applications, PA-DSS needed to evolve, again, to properly address the diverse and advanced development practices, as well as staying ahead of the rapidly evolving threat landscape. So in comes SSF. In January of 2019, the PCI Council published the Secure Software Framework, which was built on the strengths and lessons learned from PA-DSS. However, the format has changed. Now containing 2 separate standards, the Secure Software Framework was created to stay ahead of, again, not only the payment application threat landscape, but also to support advanced development practices and to ensure security throughout the entire application lifecycle. So breaking down a brief overview of the 2 standards within the Software Secure Framework, we have the Secure Software Standard, which is the direct relation to PA-DSS, and the Secure Lifecycle Standard. The Secure Software Standard will demonstrate that payment software has been developed to protect the integrity of software, the confidentiality of the sensitive data that it captures, stores, processes, and transmits. The benefit of using software security standard validated software in a merchant environment is that it can be selected from a PCI Council list of validated payments with the knowledge and confidence that the application has gone through the strict rigor and validation of not only the SSF assessor organization, but also it has been cleared and validated through the PCI Council. When these softwares are implemented in a PCI compliant fashion, they greatly reduce the time and cost of development of a payment application to a merchant. On the Secure Software Lifecycle Standard, we have a framework, a standard to provide vendors with an integrated security lifecycle management program. The idea is to make sure that software is designed and able to withstand attacks, and to culminate in an ongoing process for vendors to continually develop and protect the payment applications that they are selling. So now let's talk a little bit about the structure of these 2 standards within the Software Security Framework. The Software Secure Standard is structured to have a core set of requirements. This is similar in concept to PA-DSS is structured. The difference now is, in addition to the core requirements, there are also what are called supporting modules. This new module-based architecture is designed to address the particular use cases of applications that are now beyond the old applicability of PA-DSS. And additionally, it's designed to account for the future potential of platform-specific requirements and anything necessary to broaden the applicability of payments software. Additionally, the Council has stated that in the future, modules will be added. Currently, there is only one module, and its specific function is to protect account data. So structurally, within the secure software, in the core requirements, at a high level, we have security objectives such as minimizing the attack surface of the application, review of protection mechanisms, critical asset protection, access control and authentication, sensitive data protection, the use of cryptography, secure operations such as change management, activity tracking, attack detection, and then of course, software lifecycle management, threat and vulnerability management, secure software updates, vendor guidance, and lastly, Module A, which is sensitive authentication data and the protection of cardholder data. The secure software lifecycle standard is based on security objectives such as software security governance, identifying software security responsibilities and resources, software security policy and strategy, software engineering, threat identification, vulnerability identification and mitigation, secure software and data management, change management, software integrity protection, sensitive data protection, communication to key stakeholders, vendor security guidance, and of course, software update information. If you could please advance to the next slide. So to have a discussion about eligibility for SSF, we need to take a step back to see where we were with eligibility for PA-DSS. Basically, the reason why we're discussing it is important to see the contrast between the previous eligibility dynamic and the current one. In the past, PA-DSS eligibility was typically determined by answering a series of questions, which any of said questions were answered yes. This was an indication that the application would not be applicable for PA-DSS validation. This, of course, was a guideline to determine eligibility and was not in and of itself exhaustive. However, it was a good indicator as to if the application would be eligible for PA-DSS certification. In our experience, we found that the eligibility criteria was somewhat limiting. Vendors developing payment applications, majority of the criteria of PA-DSS they would be meeting. Specifically, their application would store, process, or transmit credit card data. It would be sold or distributed and licensed to third parties only. It would not be a bespoke application. However, with that said, many of these payment softwares did not meet all the eligibility criteria, although they did tick the standard boxes. So if we could move to the next slide, please. So in contrast to that, at the time of SSF program launch, we have the following eligibility guidelines. And we say at the time of launch because, as stated previously, as new modules are designed and implemented into the future, the applicability, the eligibility for payments applications will expand. So right now, in short, any payment application that supports or facilitates payments transactions, anything that stores, processes, or transmits unencrypted account data, anything that is handling sensitive data as per Module A and is developed for commercial sale to multiple entities, that is currently the core criteria, the new broader criteria to get payment applications certified under the secure software standard. The types of products that wouldn't be eligible, in brief, in-house developed app for one entity, applications that operate on consumer devices that are not solely dedicated to payments. Something, a payment application on a phone. Anything intended to be loaded on a specific hardware terminal, not eligible at this time. Operating systems that have integrated payments modules, a database that would have some manner of integrated payment, and any other type of commercial software developed for a purpose unrelated to transaction or payment processing. Next slide, please. So an important timeline of transition. In this, we can see some things that are in the past. The standard being published, documentation being provided, applicability of assessors being submitted to the council for validation, certifying companies such as Megaplan IT and others to be eligible to perform these types of assessments, getting folks trained, and starting to perform the assessments, listing entities on the PCI Council's website that have certified to the SSF. And so notable highlights from this to consider that are dated into the future would be the June 2021 deadline for acceptance of new PA-DSS submissions. And to see that October of 2022, the PA-DSS program closes. Essentially, there is a planning aspect there for entities that may still be required to do a PA-DSS certification. And in that regard, it would be recommended to ensure that that final validation window isn't missed, and to plan accordingly to ensure that all submissions are in prior to the deadline of June 2021. As of October of 2022, the PA-DSS program will close. At that time, PA-DSS applications that were previously certified will no longer be acceptable for new deployment. If you could please move to the next slide. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the details, benefits, and the increased flexibility of the secure software standard. So the secure software standard providing an advanced approach to support both traditional and modern payment software. In other words, it is possible to validate software that is currently PA-DSS validated, but it's also designed to support a broader group of payment applications that we're going to discuss here in a moment. This broader group of payment applications could be summarized by saying not just applications that perform auth and settlement. Of the many criteria of the former PA-DSS program, the primary eligibility criteria was, does the application perform auth and settlement? No longer is that required for validation. So some of the types of software that will benefit from the new SSF program are point of sale suites or general point of sale system, payment middleware, payment gateways and switches, back office payment applications, point of sale kiosks, point of sale face-to-face, point of interaction devices, shopping cart or storefront payment applications, card not present apps, automated fuel dispensers, and various payment components. The change will also allow for an architectural difference. In the past, the entity integrating the payment application would have to be in control of the environment, meaning there was no software as a service, no payment software as a service, and no cloud platform that was hosted by a third party, not the entity who is consuming the product. With the new standard, there will be inclusions of more deployment types. So of the products that I've listed, it may be possible, where applicable, for those things to be in a SaaS platform or in a cloud platform, still distributed commercially in an off-the-shelf format, just served from a third-party hosted provider. So within SSF, we have an increase in the software security standard. We have increased assessment details that drill down into facts such as third-party components, services, any type of library, items that are creating potential attack surface in the application. We have an increased granularity for enumerating application components and discussing any potential vulnerabilities they may be introducing. Additionally, a more granular vulnerability management program is designed to not only address injectable type vulnerabilities, but also critical asset attacks as core components of the application. For third-party components that are utilized in the app, items such as open source libraries, services, components, additional functionalities that may not be developed in-house, may be open source, may be third-party, these types of services are potential to introduce vulnerability. And so enumerating all of those types of assets is required in the reporting structure. And additionally, it's designed to intend that developers keep track of these items. Increased granularity in attack surface detection and identification, more advanced discussions on the mitigation techniques of potential vulnerabilities, a process to continually test and assess third-party components for security issues, identifying and fixing bugs in legacy software to make sure that these items, these bugs, are fixed early and do not propagate through future versions of the software. New techniques to identify these things, such as mission impact analysis, functional dependency network analysis, mission threat analysis. These are now required components of the development process. In addition, anything such as sensitive data protection, encryption key management, authentication credentials, integrity checks, these are requiring increased security and oversight. So additionally, new enumerations are required for other things besides third-party components. Items such as sensitive data, giving an overview of the types of sensitive data, how these sensitive data flow through the environment. Things such as account data, authentication credentials, sensitive data types like PAN, PIN, track, sensitive authentication data, username, password, etc. And increased granularity on how this information is handled within the application and how it's protected in transmission, in storage. Secure functions are called out to be enumerated. Functions such as data encryption, encryption key management, user authentication, the mechanisms that support those, any associated information they may come in contact with, and again, how this information is protected through integrity checks and access control management. Sensitive resources, LDAP, libcrypto, keychain, anything requiring sensitive function, user authentication, data encryption, encryption key management. It's required to identify where these components are coming from. Are they coming from open source, Microsoft, iOS, various vendors, and then of course how these things are interacting with the application. If you could advance to the next slide, please. So that's a wrap up on SSF, some of its increased functionality, granularity, and in closing, all of these things are designed to address the new threat landscape, new applicability in applications, and of course, ensuring the end game of properly securing these applications. So now we move into the second standard within the Secure Software Framework, the Secure Software Lifecycle Standard. So from a developer's perspective, it's commonly heard that developers have a tough time implementing security throughout the entire software development lifecycle. Questions such as timing, process, procedures, policy, to what extent should security practices be integrated into the development process? These questions can be paralyzing to developers. Potentially in some scenarios, it can be becoming a secondhand citizen and not considered at the forefront of the software development process. Secure SLC was designed to provide a baseline of security requirements and the associated testing procedures so that software vendors could validate that they're properly managing security of the payment software throughout its life cycle. So some of the increased options provided to companies who participate in the Secure Software Lifecycle Standard. It's important to note, and the slide demonstrates something we'll expand upon. It's not required to become secure SLC to validate payments to SSF. So what we're going to talk about now is a little bit of the options and the reasons as to why an entity would perform this. So one major benefit of being listed, of becoming certified, is that all certified entities will be listed on the PCI Council's website. And this is kind of a strong point. You know, the best example I give of this is on any given first-time level 1 PCI DSS assessment, an entity will ask me, hey, we've gone through all of this hard work to become certified. Where's our listing on the PCI Council's website? Are we going to be listed? For PCI DSS, the answer is no. The council doesn't keep a list of compliant entities. I don't know the exact reason for this. I imagine it's probably something to do with the sheer number of compliant vendors. However, it's an interesting point because besides the hard work that folks put in for PCI, there is a notoriety to having the certification. And so with that said, it's very poignant that secure SLC vendors will be listed on the PCI Council's website. In and of itself, that will reflect the hard work and dedication they've put in to manage these programs. In addition, it's a great marketing tool, you know, for any entity to be listed on the PCI Council's website. So once certified as an SLC vendor, very similar, and both standards hold a 3-year certification. Once the assessor has completed it and they're found to be compliant and or validated, the secure software lifecycle entity now has the ability to attest to the fact that their SLC program has not changed annually and submit to the PCI SSC for this ongoing compliance. When the 3rd year is reached, it would be required for the entity to revalidate with an assessor. In addition, once certified to SLC, an entity has the ability to perform their own Delta assessments. And so that's what we have in the slide here. And what we're demonstrating is, in this new culture of constantly evolving payment applications, it's quite feasible that these applications will evolve within a month, a quarter, a year. And so a Delta assessment may come up. You know, Delta assessments can be comprised of things that change within the software that meet that criteria. And we're not going to go too deep into discussion, but in a typical SDLC, there's a lot of Delta changes that may occur. So the advantage of having an SLC certification is that these entities are now empowered to perform their own Delta assessment change validations and perform all submissions to the PCI Council. So this would be a great benefit in reducing their workflow. Number one, they will be able to submit on their own behalf. And 2, they won't be required to integrate an assessor to validate their activities and their Delta submission. In addition, this can have a cost savings implication due to not requiring the involvement of an assessor and potentially having less downtime with the developers interacting with the assessor. Also, if an entity was to be developing multiple payment applications, this concept of saving time and saving assessor costs would be compound for every additional app. So if an entity, you know, develops 2, 3, 4, 10, however many applications that they're putting out, the benefit of the SLC certification will be compound with all of the Delta reviews and submissions they'll be able to do on their own behalf. And lastly, and probably the most important, it proves there's a culture of security within the development team. Not to make light of the difficulties of development, but it is a very poignant statement that I've heard of such things, that security can be put second, and of course the overall outcome of the development to be put first. for whatever reason, that is something that is occurring in the real world, and the SLC program is designed to address that. Next slide, please. So let's talk about planning the transition to SSF from PA-DSS. So, well, first off, if an entity is not already PA-DSS certified, first and foremost, it's a recommendation to have a familiarity with the program, and of course, to reach out to an entity such as Megaplan IT or a SSF certified company to have discussions specifically around the best strategy for the vendor and their application. Engaging an assessor to assist in developing a pre-assessment strategy, gap analysis, to work on alignment with the standards or standard that they choose to be certifying or validating against. It's highly recommended to not only have a brief review of what it is, but to have the assessor's input to guide and to assist. For entities that are currently PA-DSS compliant, it is a benefit to go with a company that has both PA experience and SSF, and to work together again with the uniqueness of the applications to ensure that the proper strategy for the continuity, support of the timeline to submission, all of the factors that are necessary to create a bespoke approach for any entity looking to move to SSF from PA-DSS or to have not previously performed PA-DSS at all. And again, in both circumstance, gap analysis against the requirements, development of any plan to remediate gaps, knowing how to analyze the previous information on PA-DSS assessments and cross-reference it to the current SSF program. In addition to that, policy development for the entities that have never been compliant or have not gone through the program before. One important point too, to call out for currently PA-DSS compliant entities, it may be possible that those entities have a user base that is either demanding the entity to move off immediately to SSF, or they may be requiring that PA-DSS be supported till the end of its life cycle. In either of these circumstances, Megaplan IT works with the client to map out the most efficient timeline and transition of the PA-DSS to SSF standard, or to perform SSF for the first time. So always a concern, lead time and submission. What do I mean by that? After performing the entire assessment, all of the reporting is completed, risk reviews, mitigations, everything has been gone through. There is a time to submit to the council, which requires the PCI Council to review and validate the submission. The council requests an SLA to be made aware of roughly 30 days. And so it's not uncommon for submissions to go beyond 30 days, and at the greatest extent, they can go up to 90. So Megaplan IT recommends and works to strategize on timelines with clients to ensure that these lead times are considered, and the submission process, submission times, the council AQM review, all of which are considered in creating a timeline to completion and ultimate validation and certification. So it's important to note that once certified, entities will be listed on the PCI Council's website, both for the secure software standard and the secure lifecycle standard. This will appear on a tab, which is currently validated payment applications on the Council's website. There may be an involvement in time as PA-DSS no longer is supported. That page will transition completely to SSF and SLC. But currently, there may be, currently that's the plan. In the future, they may create a specific tab for that. I don't know if they've published that information yet. So in closing, this new standard, it's gonna bring a lot of new people to the table that were denied eligibility from PA-DSS. It's going to allow flexibility in validation, and it's going to allow for an approach that developers will identify and sometimes be mitigating their own internal security risks, and the assessors are then quantifying the efficacy of these mitigations. Very much a more flexible approach than simply misaligning with the standard and then, of course, being found non-compliant. So if you could advance to the next slide, please. So it's important to note that all documentation, all supporting informational resources are provided publicly on the PCI Council's website. The URL here is listed. Currently, there are 14 in total documents supporting SSF. Most notably, the program guides for both of the standards, the reporting templates, which are very valuable at getting a good idea of what the actual rigor of each assessment is, the standard itself. So basically running through the entirety of each standard and giving explanations on why particular control objectives, or more specifically, an example of why a particular control objective is or what it's attempting to do. And lastly, attestation documentation is there. But it's an important highlight. It's always recommended if you are planning on participating in any of these programs to not only reach out to the QSA, but to also take a moment to familiarize yourself with the type of information that the council has provided. They put a lot of time into this documentation, and it is extremely beneficial, helpful, and there's a lot of good information in there. And that is it for that slide.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. Want to definitely offer our thanks, and this has been a really helpful, informational, and educational webinar on SSF and the transition to it from PA-DSS. As far as questions, I have several questions that have been asked, and so I'm going to run through these, and we will make sure that we can get all these questions asked. And if you have additional ones, you can please post them in the Q&A within Zoom, and we will get them answered. So Anthony, the first question is, should vendors continue using PA-DSS or wait until the SSF is launched before they initiate assessments?
So I think the answer to that would go back to an original point. It's both. So one should determine the contractual agreements and some of the expectations of their currently listed payment applications and the user base. Once they've pulled that information to understand if they do require by either contractual obligation or client request further certification, then that would be the outcome of that. On the flip side, it is recommended that they start to do gap analysis for SSF now, and that is one very poignant thing to consider, is that these frameworks, the framework itself and the standards therein, they are new, and so being new, there will be a slight additional layer of complexity and integration, and again, that pain point is reduced by early engagement with a QSA and planning ahead of time, and again, to ensure that whatever deadline they need to meet for SSF, that they're planning out far in advance.
Okay, thank you. The next question I have is, how does the PCI SSF impact applications that are currently PA-DSS validated?
So it impacts them once they go past the 2022 date that we stated earlier and are no longer applicable for new deployment. They're no longer acceptable for new deployment. And so what does that mean? It basically means you can't buy any new PA-DSS software at that time. You will have to see if it has transitioned to SSF for purchase, or purchase a different product. For entities that already have it, or pre-existing deployments, that is a tricky subject. The council has basically stated to determine if you can continue as a merchant or any entity, how do you determine if you can continue to use an expired payment application that is no longer acceptable for new deployment? And the answer there is to review with your stakeholders, such as card brands, acquirers, banks, processors, and their continued acceptability for an entity using a application that is only acceptable for pre-existing deployment.
Okay, thank you. The next question I have is, can you provide any additional benefits of becoming SLC, the software lifecycle, for becoming compliant and certified against SLC, since it is optional but definitely recommended? Can you provide any additional details of why SLC is important?
Yeah, I mean, I think in short, aside from the marketing piece, which is a powerful statement, knowing that entities that purchase these validated softwares, there is a sea of them out there currently. And with the hope of SSF, there's, let's say, roughly 700 payments products out there now. SSF should increase that number over time. And so looking for something, needle in a haystack, I guess, it does help to say, okay, well, what else did they do? Again, that marketing piece, they're also SLC certified. So that's a big point. The Delta assessments, again, will be very unique to the organization. It'll be very unique to the overhead required to perform the Deltas and how often they are occurring. The thing to, just as a side note to that, is in this new program, it would be very difficult to say a piece of software is developed and untouched for 1 year, right? So conceptually there, you are having a continuous life cycle of change for, at minimum, third-party libraries and components. It would be very reasonable to assume that some of these very mundane things will change, mundane in terms of application component, but very significant in potential vulnerability, requiring a Delta assessment potentially. And so being able to do that without an assessor's intervention is a very strong point. And there is a concept that it should make it easier to develop these applications. Once adherence to secure SLC is performed, your baseline framework for your software development lifecycle should be seamless enough that it will make integrating security into every aspect that's necessary easier. And for some entities, that may, resound. That might be a resounding fact. They may look at themselves internally and say, I don't know if our culture of security is as good as it could be. And so that would be a huge benefit, rather than to try to develop their own culture of security to say, let's take on this, get compliant, get listed, be able to have the headroom to perform our own Delta assessment submissions, and to be listed on the council's website.
Thank you. The next question, I have two more, and we'll run through these and then we'll wrap up. So the last two questions that I have is, what's the real benefit of becoming SSF compliant and certified early versus waiting? And with only a few firms being able to perform SSF assessments, how do you feel the acceleration and the adoption is going to go?
Well, the adoption will be forced based off of the timeline. So with that, I guess if we're looking at making sure that no applications fall off of validation, whether it be for PA or the secure software standard, it's recommended to start as early as possible and not wait to get too close to the sunset date in 2022. with everything that is happening in the world of PCI, these standards are evolving to, to become more applicable, to become more functional, to become more secure. They really are taking into account what is necessary to realistically be integrated, and not to be such a rigid component of pass or fail. But they're not getting easier. And with that being said, it would probably be recommended to PA companies currently to make sure that they put this under the lens that it's not equal to PA, it's going to be harder, and it is going to require a little bit of lead time compared to their previous PA assessments. Integrating, learning what they need to do, and to prepare for the new requirements within the standard.
Okay, thank you. And our last question is, what does acceptable for pre-existing deployment only actually mean?
Yeah, and again, we touched on that, but that is actually a very powerful, very good, gonna come up a lot, right? There's going to be a lot of PA payment products. Well, there's currently, as I said, over 700 of them that will, in the future, be no longer valid for new deployment. And again, the risk of using those applications, the assessor can't dictate that you move off of those things. Payment brands can. There is an FAQ where the council recommends that you reach out. The council's recommendation is that any entity looking to use an application that is only acceptable for pre-existing deployment to reach out and ensure that the applicable payment brands and stakeholders are okay with that. So in essence, they're saying you really should move off of it if it's only acceptable for pre-existing deployment. We can't make you, an assessor can't make you non-compliant for it. However, there is a risk, and the risk could be significant. Very similar to, say, anything that is end of life, if it's no longer in development, and knowing that if it was in development but no longer under the PA program, in the PA's eyes, you would no longer be able to not assess against the applicable requirements from requirement 6.3 through 6.6 on the 6.3 through 6.5 on PCI DSS, right? So, with that said, it's kind of a loaded gun. It's recommended to get rid of any applications that are only acceptable for pre-existing deployment, but to know you do need to reach out to the stakeholders, payment brands where applicable, processors, and banks.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's all the questions that we have from the audience. So again, I want to thank Anthony Petruso for offering his experience, expertise, and advice on the transition from PA-DSS to SSF. And we invite you to reach out to the Megaplan IT team. You can visit us on our website. You can call us at our 1-800 number. Anthony's email is available here as well. And as part of any assessment that we offer from a services perspective, we include trusted advisory support. We also include remediation guidance. We also include policy and procedure development. So make sure to reach out to us. Let us know how we can help you with your planning, with your pre-assessment, your gap assessments related to SSF. And we appreciate your time today. And thank you again, Anthony, for your expertise. And hope everybody has a great afternoon. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.